Kind of a weird one, right, Jeff? I guess, what can you tell us? Kind of a unique situation here.
Yeah, it was. So we got a call late yesterday afternoon that Josh, his most recent sample was collected, I think, July 23rd, came back for our old friend, the M3 metabolite, very small amount, under 100 picograms. Josh, obviously the background on Josh, so when he fought on Contender, the Nevada Commission tested him. He ended up testing positive for drostanolone, which is an anabolic steroid, was suspended for 9 months. We signed him nevertheless, and when something like that happens, you are required to be in the program for an amount of time before you can fight. It's at least 6 months and a couple of negative tests. He was in the program for 10 months. That was the 15th sample that USADA had collected from him, and the one that comes back, the night before he was supposed to fight tested positive. In none of those other 14 where the results came back were there any M3 metabolite, and we know quite a bit about the M3 metabolite now, much more than 4 years ago when John Jones was going through it. We have close to, I think, 10 athletes who have had this issue go on. We have literally hundreds of tests and results concerning those athletes, so we have a pretty good idea of what this substance looked like, and time after time after time, we don't see any evidence of continued use or exposure to it. You just see this metabolite, and the theory there is that once you are exposed to it, whether intentionally or not, it's going to be with you for a long period of time. So, if anything comes out of this, it's a good lesson, not only for our UFC fighters, but for aspiring fighters. And I was talking to Jason House last night, Josh's manager, saying you need to tell your guys and girls that want to get into the UFC, start acting like you're in the UFC right now, because what you do now, even though you're not in the UFC yet, you can end up paying for it, when you later down the line do get in. It's one of the craziest substances that I've seen here. So he was under 100 picograms, so not an issue. Under the UFC program, we created a threshold for the M3 metabolite. Any positive test under 100 picograms, it's not automatically thrown out, but it becomes an atypical finding where USADA then goes and investigates it, and if they don't find any other evidence, which they didn't hear, then it's not an adverse finding. However, that's not the Nevada Commission rules, and even though this was a USADA UFC test, we always share our testing results with Nevada, especially in situations like this. And Nevada's precedent is they like to have these public hearings, to go through it, and generally what they require is 6 months of testing at least twice a month with that M3 metabolite staying under 100 picograms. So Josh will be on the agenda for Nevada. You'll hear all the details about this case probably later this month, but it's going to be a period of time before he's licensed in Nevada. Nevada did not suspend him, nor did they tell me they have plans to do so, and Jeff Mullen also told me last night that they are comfortable with him going to fight somewhere else. And this is not new either. I mean, we've had several instances, John Jones being probably the most high profile, where when these findings come up, we've gone and fought them other places. I did see a report that this fight's happening next week in San Diego, and I can tell you that that's not signed, sealed, and delivered yet. We've definitely talked to them and talked to Andy Foster, but he's doing what he should be doing right now, and that's basically his due diligence. He wants to take a look at all those testing results. He wants to talk to Dr. Eichner, who runs the Salt Lake City laboratory that analyzed this, and he wants another test from him, which we're in the process of getting. So, we'll determine that probably early next week.
And as you said, this is something that can just kind of pop up from time to time, right? So, if everything is on the up and up, I mean, could this happen again later in his career, or is it just, and you have to readdress it every time, or is it kind of like, well, it's kind of carte blanche at this point because we know what's going on?
Absolutely can and probably will. Again, going back to those 10 or so athletes that we have dealing with this issue, this is what happens, that the metabolite will go away for a period of time, months, sometimes many months, and then reappear. The common factor appears to be getting close to a fight, when theoretically the thought is they're bringing their body weight down, and somehow when you're exposed to this substance, it hibernates or hides out in the body and then is released as that weight's being dropped. That seems to be a very common factor with these.
Do we know what the primary substance is that's causing this?
The theory is dehydrochloromethyltestosterone, or DHCMT, also known as oral turinabol. It's an old school steroid used by, I think, the East Germans back in the 60s and 70s. Not available for commercial use, not authorized for human consumption anywhere in the world. It's not like it's easy to find. You can go down to even your pharmacy and get it, which kind of adds to the mystery here. There's some theories that it could be coming from potentially another chlorinated steroid, not that one. There's also some theories that it can come from something completely benign. I mean, that's obviously been a concern of ours. Haven't seen any evidence. There's a lot of scientists looking through that. But I think, definitely it's a very strange and unique acting substance.
Have any of the athletes that are dealing with this told you, like, Jeff, man, I really don't want to talk about this publicly, but yeah, I cheated, this is what I took, probably this is what it was?
We have had a couple who actually admitted to using DHCMT, and those athletes, they've told USADA, they've been the subject of, studies to try to find out, hey, okay, here's someone we know who took it. Are they any different from the ones who are claiming they didn't? Look, I hate to throw out theories there, but I think this one's pretty obvious in that Josh tested positive for drostanolone, which is, an anabolic steroid, very much on the black market. And when you use things like that, who knows what the hell else is in it? And, my guess here would be there was potentially something in it before he got in here. Again, 14 results, no, not even an inkling of the M3 metabolite leading up to this one. And his most recent negative test before this one was a week and a half, 2 weeks before. And so that's when you really know, like, this is not new ingestion. If he would have used from that last negative test to this one, you'd expect to see, based on the studies, the parent compound and the short and midterm metabolite, which can be around for, weeks, if not a month, and there was nothing of that here.
In those other 14, it wasn't they were under the threshold, there was literally just nothing.
Nothing there. Now they're going back, USADA's going back to look to see if there's something called signals. You're literally talking less than a picogram. You're getting down to such mind-blowing small amounts when you're talking about that. But they're going back to look to see, like, hey, was there any inkling at all? That'll take a little while, but no, in the 14 results that have come back, there's been no reporting whatsoever.
How soon did you clear Quinlan after this was found?
Well, it's not me that clears them. It's USADA, and that's
under UFC anti-doping. As far as you're concerned, how soon were you guys able to feel good about it?
Yeah, we're always concerned about that, but that's the dynamics of this program is we hire USADA to independently make those decisions. So we have faith in them that they make the right decisions. And so in terms of what did they see, why did they see it, that was a decision that was made by USADA. I don't potentially know all the factors that they looked at other than he had 14 negative tests, the volume and the timing of the testing with nothing showing up. So certainly, on the face of things, it looks to be an appropriate decision in our eyes and ears.
So when they brought this to you yesterday,
yep,
after the weigh-ins, and then they had the levels, which is under the amount
correct
you're comfortable with?
Yep.
So do you see the Nevada State Athletic Commission getting on the same page as you guys on this?
That's a great question. So that's definitely something we talk with them regularly about. They're not there yet. It takes a regulation change, which can be timely. Interestingly, a week or two ago at the ABC conference, which is all the athletic conferences, and not just this country but throughout the world as well, USADA went and gave a presentation on this and said, look, here's what the UFC anti-doping program's doing in terms of these thresholds, and you as a commission should look at this. We have the science to back these things up, and from what I heard, got some really good reception. California, 3 or 4 years ago, had a summit on this issue. So they brought out scientists. I went. We actually had Neil Magny come and talk because he had an issue with the threshold substance. And California, Andy Foster passed some regulation setting up these thresholds. So they have a threshold for M3 metabolite. Theirs is actually a little bit bigger than ours. It's 200 picograms. So that's certainly why we're able to have these discussions with Andy about, hey, potentially going to San Diego because it fits under their rules. I believe the ABC Medical Committee adopted these, recommending them to, their members. And I think maybe even the ABC voted on this, a couple of years ago. And that doesn't mean much because each individual commission has to pass it individually and separately back at home. But it's a good start, and we're making, I believe, some real good progress here.
Just one follow-up. So there is still a possibility that if they get the test early enough next week, he could still fight on that card?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and I apologize, I'm going to throw a curveball at you.
Sure.
Can you clarify, is Connor still in the USADA testing poll, and has he been tested this year?
So we do not talk, and this is in the history of the program, we do not talk about people's UFC status as it relates to the testing pool. Now, the testing pool and our numbers are transparent. Anyone, and I guess people have been, can go on there and look to see who's tested and when, but that's, precedent we set at the beginning that I don't comment on who's in or out, who's retired, who isn't, so no comment on that.
I appreciate it.
Yep.
Hey, Jeff, you said that Josh is not going to be licensed in Nevada for a little bit. Is this going to affect anywhere else throughout the country or the world?
Generally, in past instances, it hasn't. Nevada, and Jeff Mullen told me yesterday, we're not going to prevent him from fighting other places. And typically the way they do this is it's not a suspension. This is just a licensing issue with Nevada. So they set up things that need to be met in order for him to be licensed in the future. And typically what that's been is 6 months of consecutive testing, at least twice a month being tested, and that M3 metabolite staying under 100 picograms. I can't put myself in their shoes, but that's certainly what we're expecting to happen at this public hearing in a couple weeks.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.